A 7¼ inch gauge Sweet William steam locomotive, part 50, working on the cab, which would not fit with the boiler cladding in place. Some modifications to the cab design were required, which was surprisingly difficult to do. I really have got into the head of the builder of this engine, and I just get the feeling that by this stage of the build he was getting really fed up. I remember wondering why the cab was difficult to remove when I first removed it. That's because the sequential order of assembly was a bit strange. The cab was originally fitted after the firebox cladding. Some steel angle at the bottom part of the front of the cab that mounts it to the footplate makes it impossible to fit the spectacle plate part of the cab into the gap between the cladding of the boiler barrel and the firebox. I remember that when I removed the safety valve extension pipes, there were a really tight fit in the slot in the top of the cab. This clip shows you what I mean. I need to slightly enlarge this slot so that the pipes go through without being tight. I don't need to remove a lot of metal, so the flapper wheel will be okay, but not the one you've just seen me use because it dances all over the place. I'm going to use the flapper wheel on the right hand side of this image. The groove that's worn in the flapper wheel from a previous job is quite useful to guide it around the slot. And in no time at all, the safety valve extension pipes had a nice easy fit in the slot. The next modification to the cab is a simple one, or at least that's what I thought. I need to remove this brass blanking plug which covers the fact that a hole was drilled in the wrong place. As the blanking plug was just glued in position, it was simple to rotate it with a pair of pliers to loosen it. But I could not withdraw the plug with the pliers. I had to resort to a different method. This is a very small ball peen hammer, and it was perfect for tapping the plug out from the other side. Now, as you can see, there are two holes close together, and once the saddle tank is fitted, they will serve no function because the tank is in the way. As the engine was built with incredibly tall side tanks, the top hole in the spectacle plate was for the blower pipe to pass through to run all the way down the top of the boiler to the smoke box. Here's a quick close-up of this very small and very useful ball peen hammer. I would normally use this hammer for very small scale riveting jobs. It's good to see an alternative use for it. The original extremely tall side tanks were mounted to the spectacle plate using this bolt assembly. The nuts on the bolts were tightened against the spectacle plate, and then the tanks were put in place, and 3 more nuts were then used on each side to secure each of the side tanks to the spectacle plate. Once I remove these, they are redundant and unfortunately visible, but by fitting 3 short hexagon bolts into the holes with the heads outermost, it should look okay. The next part of the job is to remove the whistle and the fitting. This is a very simple job. I'm a bit concerned though that the fitting, as you see it here, may be a little bit too low for the position of the saddle tank, but I won't know about that until I actually fit the saddle tank. It's time now to remove the windows, which are 2 discs of clear acrylic sandwiched between the 2 window frames. These brass window frames are marked A and B. I'll leave that for the moment until I clean them up and refit them once the cab has been modified and painted. These last 2 jobs were the simple ones. Very easy to do. Remove the brass frames, a simple unbolting job, followed by removing the acrylic discs. As I look through the hole in the spectacle plate, I can see part of my milling machine and my Action Man deserter hung from the shelf. I often use this Action Man as a scale reference because he is 1 foot tall, and when I'm not using it, he just hangs from the shelf. I'm putting the windows and the window frames in a safe place, and by videoing where they are, at least I won't forget where to put them. Right, here we go. This is the difficult bit, and it shouldn't really be a difficult bit, but it was. The big problem I have is that the steel angle which holds the cab to the cab floor is impossible to fit over the boiler cladding. The spectacle plate cutout fits over the boiler itself, and that's no problem, but it will not fit over the boiler once it's got the extra thickness of the cladding in place. What I need to do is remove this badly made small bracket at one side and then cut the other bracket at the other side so that the cutout in the spectacle plate can just sit in the gap between the cladding. Simple enough, but in actual fact, no it wasn't. It was very difficult to do. First of all, I started to grind off the heads of the rivets using my Proxon angle grinder. And that wasn't all that effective because the angle grinder only has a flapper wheel on it. Instead, I fitted a proper grinding wheel into my Proxon motor tool and attacked the rivet heads using this. After a while, the rivet heads did start to disappear. I do appreciate that this video is possibly extremely boring to certain viewers, but probably interesting to other viewers with less experience. Even when I'd removed the rivet heads using the grinder, it was still surprisingly difficult to remove the piece of angle entirely, and I had to resort to considerable violence. I need to fill these holes, and I managed to fill one of the holes by hammering over what was left of the rivet, then cleaning up the mess using my Proxon angle grinder. I had to use an entirely different method for the angle at the other side. First of all, using a hacksaw, I sawed through most of it. Before anybody writes in, yes, I am aware I could have used a really big angle grinder and brutalized everything, but no, I prefer these smaller tools. They're less dangerous. After all, it's not the size of your instrument, it's the way that you use it. On this piece of angle, there was only one rivet to grind away. I did that, as before, using a grinder in my motor tool. Then I changed the grinder to a diamond cutter, and here I'm using the diamond cutter to finish off the cut. Then all I had to do was lever off the end piece of angle using a chisel. Obviously, during these operations, the metal of the spectacle plate did get distorted, but it's quite an easy job to hammer it flat again. This rivet came out very easily, and now you can clearly see the distortion to this part of the spectacle plate. To fix that, I'm going to have to put this on something solid and hit it with a hammer. This cab is a large and quite heavy part, and I was lucky really, because I could rest one end of it on my bandsaw and the other end of it on the vise. You will notice that I am also rounding the end of the angle that remains so that it's not sharp. In no time at all, I got the metal back to being pretty flat. I'll be revisiting this area once I've had all the paint removed by shot blasting, at a place which very conveniently is quite close to where I live. More about that later. That's it for now. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.